You've got the award in the category of community welfare. Now tell us about your related activities in a little more detail.
My project is a team oriented. We are working together with the local communities and the students and different stakeholders. We organize the local communities at the grassroots level, and we are doing a certain infrastructure in the rural area, mostly in the rural areas. It includes construction of bridges, developing water stream. Now we are doing the check dams as well as electrification of villages. Also we have built one toilet in schools. So our project is a multi-dimensional project. We work in different areas.
जल्दी करो यार, प्लीज जल्दी।
दूसरा कोई मैच है क्या?
ऐसा ही कुछ है यार, बैंक जाना है दादाजी को लेके।
हाँ यार, उम्र होने पर कभी कभी मदद तो लगती है,
पर बैंकिंग में नहीं।
वैसे भी आरबीआई कहता है सीनियर सिटीजन सबसे पहले। अगर आप 70 साल से ऊपर हैं और आप बैंक नहीं जा सकते तो बैंक आएगा आपके पास जरूरी सेवाएं लेकर, वो भी वाजिब दरों पर।
सीनियर सबसे पहले। आरबीआई कहता है जानकार बनिए, सतर्क रहिए।
Welcome. It is 7:30 in the evening in India and we are back again with our spotlight on G20. On the show today, we take a look at the 4 priorities of the G20 Culture Working Group under India's G20 presidency: protection and restitution of cultural property, harnessing living heritage for a sustainable future, promotion of cultural and creative industries and creative economy, and leveraging digital technologies for protection and promotion of culture on the second day of the Culture Working Group meeting in the ancient city of Khajuraho in Madhya Pradesh. Also on the show, the key takeaways from the second G20 Finance and Central Bank Deputies meeting in Bengaluru, which is a prelude to the first G20 Finance Ministers and Central Bank Governors meeting on Friday and Saturday. We will bring you details of both the meetings. I'm Munmun Bhattacharya. First up, the top stories. World Bank Group President David Malpass meets Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Looking ahead to the G20 summit, leaders discuss India's priorities, action on debt for low-income countries and vulnerable middle-income countries, and the role and evolution of international finance institutions. Second day of the G20 Finance and Central Bank Deputies meeting sees deliberations on digital public infrastructure, road to policy consensus on crypto assets, and leveraging national payment systems to enhance cross-border payment arrangements. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman shares the success of India's UPI, COBIN, account aggregator and eKYC in leading India's economic transformation and empowerment of people. Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman holds bilateral meetings with the G20 counterparts, meets US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. Yellen says 55% low-income countries are facing debt and US will push for common framework process for debt restructuring. Thanks India for its help on debt restructuring, says global economic outlook has improved. Union Ministers Dr. Virendra Kumar and Meenakshi Lekhi address inaugural session of the G20 Culture Working Group meeting in Khajuraho. Lekhi calls upon G20 countries to draw up an action plan to facilitate repatriation of antiquities which have been taken out of a country. Delegates go on an excursion to the world-famous Khajuraho temples and witness cultural performances at the Khajuraho Dance Festival. Let's take a look first at what's happening in Bengaluru. Well, DD India correspondent Aisha Khanam caught up with Adrius Charles, OECD delegate in Bengaluru, and India's leadership aimed at coming up with collective solutions to global economic challenges. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development is a unique forum where the governments of 37 democracies with market-based economies collaborate to develop policy standards to promote sustainable economic growth. India, as a member country of OECD, listen in.
First day of the G20's second meeting of the finance and central bank deputies have been fruitful, and there have been deliberations on various aspects of financial transactions, the financial security and the financial infrastructure. To talk more about today's deliberations, I have with me Andreas Schall, who is from OECD. Andreas, how was the day today with the agenda, with regard to the financial aspects of this meeting?
Thanks so much. I mean, first I should say big thanks and kudos to the Indian G20 presidency. It's fantastic that India hosted G20, and we are all touched about the warm hospitality of India. Right. Second, on the substance, I think this is very important times for international cooperation on financial issues, on support for the global economy, which is in a very complicated situation at this moment in time. We as OECD will work in particular on international taxation in order to create a more fairer, more efficient international tax system, and we also work on more efficient ways for countries to share data on carbon mitigation.
And now, what has been today's point of discussion? Because we saw that there were talks on prevention of tax evasions, money laundering. So how did this agenda unfold?
Well, I think this is a long-standing agenda, in particular on tax evasion, base erosion, profit shifting, the taxation of digital companies, where we have kind of come to a compromise a year ago on 15% minimum taxation, and now we are kind of trying to implement these agreements, and I think there's good progress in the room of countries moving forward on that, and that's what the exercise is about.
It's about inclusivity and sustainability.
It's about inclusivity, sustainability, but it's also about making the international system more efficient, fairer, and more effective at the end.
India has also shown how digital empowerment can be done. Do you think this will be in a way which can strengthen the financial transactions and the system itself?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is something which we need. I think we are. I mean, this is more a marathon than a sprint, and we have just we are probably on the first 5 or 10 kilometers, but we make some progress, and this is what this exercise is all about.
How do you look at India's leadership, especially during the pandemic, where India created digital infrastructure with regard to vaccines, with regard to financial transactions? How do the G countries look at this?
No, I think, I mean, this is just my very personal view, and I think India is doing terrific in, the digital identity, the digital public infrastructure. This is very important, and India is one of those countries where we have this discussion about leapfrogging several stages of development since more than 2 decades, and India is probably one of those countries who, because of the courageous leadership of your Prime Minister, of the people around him like Amitabh Kant, Chopra, you really lead this discussion here.
What's your experience in India, the hospitality and the culture that is on showcase here?
Now, I said at the beginning, the culture, the hospitality is just fantastic. The people are great and warm people. It's also fantastic for us to know a bit more about the culture, about the religion, about the way how people in India live and how they see the world. And for us, it's really a great experience. And I mean, as the leitmotif of the president says, one world, one family, one future.
Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Can you say that in Hindi? Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam.
Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam.
Thank you very much for trying that. That was Andreas who says that the essence of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is reflected here, and he appreciates the culture, the hospitality by the Indian presidency, and also the aspects that are being seriously discussed across the table with regard to financial security, with regard to financial infrastructure will be firmed up in the coming meetings, and the finance ministers of G20 countries will take this up. With cameraman Appaji, Asha Khanam, DD India, Bangalore.
In fact, today, World Bank Group President David Malpass met with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, looking ahead to the G20 summit hosted by the Government of India. President Malpass and Prime Minister Narendra Modi discussed India's priorities, action on debt for low-income countries and vulnerable middle-income countries, and the role and evolution of international finance institutions. A timely meeting as the finance track meetings are underway in Bengaluru. Meanwhile, the second day of the G20 Finance and Central Bank Deputies meeting saw deliberations on digital public infrastructure, road to policy consensus and crypto assets, and leveraging national payment systems to enhance cross-border payment arrangements, much like the linkage launched recently between India's UPI and Singapore's Pay Now. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman shared the success of India's UPI, co-win account aggregator and eKYC in leading India's economic transformation and in empowerment of people. Here's more on what happened in Bengaluru ahead of the two-day meeting of the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors.
Ahead of the crucial first finance ministers and central bank governors meeting under the G20 finance track, Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman participated in a high-level symposium on digital public infrastructure or DPI in Bengaluru. The symposium saw participation of Indonesian Finance Minister Dr. Sri Mulyani Indrawati, IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva, Governor of Central Bank of Brazil Roberto de Oliveira Campos Neto, and General Manager of Bank of International Settlement Augustine Carstens. It was moderated by Infosys Chairman Nandan Nilekani. Finance Minister shared the success of India's Aadhaar-enabled DPI such as UPI, co-win, account aggregator and eKYC in leading the economic transformation and in empowerment of the people of India. The high-level symposium on DPI also saw insightful discussions on inclusive growth, resilience and innovation. The FM took a long walk along the exhibits of India's digital innovations. Earlier, Day 2 of the Finance and Central Bank Deputies' meeting started with discussions on the road to policy consensus on crypto assets and leveraging national payment systems to enhance cross-border payment arrangements. The finance track of the G20 meetings deals with global economy, international finance architecture and sustainable finance, along with issues linked with infrastructure, health, international taxation and financial inclusion. Over Friday and Saturday, G20 finance ministers and central bank governors will discuss debt troubles of developing economies, cryptocurrencies and global inflationary pressures. Ahead of that meeting, US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said that the challenges being faced by the global economy are real. The future is uncertain, but the outlook has improved. During a discussion on digital payments architecture, many countries including the UAE, Thailand, Indonesia, Argentina and Mauritius evinced interest in India's UPI payment system. There is also growing interest in central bank digital currencies like Reserve Bank of India's digital rupee. Regulation of crypto assets has also been one of the priorities under India's G20 presidency, and discussions made progress on that matter as well. With Ajay Mishra in Bengaluru, Bureau Report, DD India.
On the eve of the two-day meeting of G20 finance ministers and central bank governors, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman held bilateral meetings with the counterparts in the G20, including G7 countries. Finance Minister met Italian Minister of Economy and Finance, Giancarlo Giorgetti, ahead of the G20 meeting in Bengaluru. She said that under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, India hosted the Voice of the Global South Summit and India would put forth perspectives of the Global South. The Finance Minister also met Japanese Finance Minister Shunichi Suzuki in Bengaluru. The ministers exchanged views on priorities under G20 Finance Track 2023. Both ministers looked forward to close cooperation between Japan as G7 president and India as G20 president on strengthening of multilateral development banks, debt-related issues, financing cities of tomorrow and coordinated policy for crypto assets. The Japanese minister assured his wholehearted support to India during the G20 presidency. Finance Minister also met U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen ahead of the first G20 finance ministers and central bank governors meeting in Bengaluru. The two leaders exchanged views on G20 finance track priorities under India's G20 presidency. The two leaders discussed their perspectives on strengthening multilateral development banks, global debt vulnerabilities, crypto assets and health, besides a just energy transition partnership and possible takeaways for the two sides. Both sides agreed that lessons learned from COVID-19 pandemic should not be lost sight of, and there is a need for enhancing preparedness for future pandemic-type shocks. And Union Ministers Dr. Virendra Kumar and Meenakshi Lekhi addressed the inaugural session of the G20 Culture Working Group meeting in Khajuraho. Union Minister of State for Culture Meenakshi Lekhi called upon G20 countries to move beyond discussions and draw up an action plan to facilitate repatriation of antiquities which have been taken out of a country. Here's more on what transpired on the second day of the meeting in the ancient city.
The second day of the first G20 Culture Working Group meeting started in the ancient city of Khajuraho in the Indian heartland state of Madhya Pradesh with an inaugural session. The session was addressed by the Union Social Justice and Empowerment Minister Dr. Virendra Kumar and the Union Minister of State for Culture Meenakshi Lekhi. Dr. Virendra Kumar termed culture as the platform to forge bonds between countries and communities for creating sustainable and inclusive development pathways, asserting that integrating culture within the G20 agenda has been a key achievement, as culture can be a powerful tool for promoting economic growth, social cohesion and environmental protection. The minister said that culture in G20 can foster greater cross-cultural understanding and cooperation, which is essential for addressing global complex challenges.
मेरा पूर्ण विश्वास है कि एक दूसरे को समझने और विकास पथ पर चलने के लिए विभिन्न देशों और समुदायों के मध्य संबंधों को प्रगाढ़ बनाए रखने के लिए संस्कृति का महत्व व्यापक है। संस्कृति न केवल राष्ट्रों के गौरव का द्योतक है, अपितु यह हमारी भौगोलिक सीमाओं को लांघती है तथा पारस्परिक भलाई के लिए एक दूसरे को जोड़ती है।
The minister added that India's G20 culture track is built on the idea of culture for life as a campaign for sustainable living. Union Minister of State for Culture Meenakshi Lekhi addressed the meeting, where she spoke on the vision of India's G20 presidency, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, one future, terming it a true embodiment of India's cultural ethos. Highlighting the significance of preserving and celebrating the diverse cultural heritage, she spoke on the importance of G20 deliberations to remove impediments in the way of repatriation of treasures.
We all can work towards a culture of togetherness, a culture of construction, culture of dialogue and culture of peace, and do away with the things which end up destroying cultures, create awareness about all that can go wrong.
Sharing insights into Indian culture, the Union Minister said that while in the present times there is a lot of emphasis on gender rights and women's equality, the bronze statue of the dancing girl belonging to the Harappan era clearly demonstrates what gender equality was all about.
But that bronze typically made
5,000 years ago explains what gender equality was all about. That gender equality, if you go out and visit the temple precincts, you will see the gender equality meant that we not only recognize women, but we worship them as a form of energy, as deities, which was common to both men and women. Women could have their own,
Union Culture Secretary Govind Mohan spoke on challenges faced by the culture sector, including during COVID-19 due to the closure of cultural spaces.
The purpose of this platform is to, every country has a culture, every country has a richness in whatever culture it has. The basic objective of this meeting is to create a fundamental confluence of thought, a fundamental congruence of views on some things that all of us need to do if we have to preserve our culture, if we have to showcase our culture, and if we have to make the culture of our nation in fact the culture of the world, which is what Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam is. So I would feel that the deliberations here would be useful from the point of view of evolving these kind of consensus, which makes culture a very important component of the combined thought processes of various countries, besides issues like the economy, besides issues like the environment, besides issues like labor and employment.
On Wednesday, an exhibition titled Redress, Return of Treasures, showcasing the spirit, need and future of repatriation of cultural property through examples of successful return of cultural heritage to India, was inaugurated. The exhibition, with the help of the latest technology including hologram, highlights various aspects and challenges faced in repatriation of treasures. The exhibition also includes physical display of 26 priceless repatriated antiquities, including Varaha, Dancing Ganesha, a mean pillar, terracotta yaksha, anthropomorphic figure, Parrot Lady of Khajuraho, among others. In the evening, delegates were taken on an excursion to the world-famous Khajuraho temples and witnessed cultural performances at the Khajuraho Dance Festival. With Bureau Inputs, Aditya Srivastav's report from Khajuraho for DD India.
And joining us now, a perspective, is Professor Manvi Seth. She is Dean with the National Museum Institute based in New Delhi, and she is currently in Khajuraho, the ancient city where all the action is. Such a pleasure to have you, Professor Seth, on India at G20. I thought it was quite important what Meenakshi Lekhi, Minister of State for Culture, said. He said that it is time that the G20 moves beyond discussions and an action plan is drawn up for repatriation of antiquities. There is an exhibition which is on there in Khajuraho which displays some of those antiquities which have come back to India. In fact, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has made it a key focus area of his government. How critical is that action plan which Minister Lekhi spoke about?
Repatriation of cultural heritage adds value to the cultural life of a nation, cultural identity of a nation. It's important not just for India, for every country. India is taking a leadership role in raising this issue globally. Through these antiquities which have been displayed here, which are success stories, which have come back from various nations. It talks about global cooperation, which is increasing in the area of repatriation, but it also talks about that how every country now needs to raise this. India, definitely there has been a rise in number of success stories over past many years, and this graph only has to grow now. So the action plan is create awareness amongst policymakers, amongst practitioners about the issue of repatriation and how internationally and nationally we can garner support for it.
And it was also said, yes, please go ahead.
Yes. So we are talking about the process of repatriation, the success stories, not just from India, from all over the world. They have to be brought into public eye. They have to be brought in through such platforms, and so that people can feel pride. And that's what has been attempted here. Through these objects, through international conventions, through national efforts, through the process which goes behind repatriation. And we have tried to showcase how each country is now giving more and more back. India is very happy to be getting, in past 2 decades, much more than it has in previous years. And we just want this graph to keep rising.
What role can digital technologies play in protection of the cultural heritage and also in their promotion? Because that's another imponderable for the ongoing culture working group meeting.
So we are in a digital age, and digital for safeguarding, digital for data. When we have digital, if there is proper documentation, if there is transparency of the data, it helps in safeguarding of cultural heritage. And digital has to be that every object is well documented. When we have that kind of documentation, it's very easy to track objects. It's very easy to safeguard them from illicit trafficking. And these objects which are here, the previous victims of illicit trafficking are now here as ambassadors of cultural heritage of their friends around the world. So if we have proper documentation of what we have got in this country, in each part, it will definitely help in safeguarding.
Right, it was said ahead of the meeting that this meeting is going to be predicated on the linkage between culture and life. Culture for life, that is the phrase that is being used. How do you look at that linkage?
India is a country with age-old culture. It's rich with culture, and it also has longest continuity of a cultural life. So culture is important for our identity. Culture is important for the cultural identity of a nation. And culture penetrates every aspect of our life. When you have such a long-running thread of culture, it becomes part of you, of every individual in the country. When they see these success stories, through these objects which have been come back, it is a sense of pride, and it is that yes, we need more such stories for a sustainable future, for diversity of culture, and I'm happy that India is taking that.
For protection and promotion of culture and linkage between culture and life or sustainable lifestyles, would you like to see within the G20 countries greater encouragement for a closer integration between culture and education, which in India we are trying to do under the National Education Policy?
Definitely, there has to be closer linkages between culture and education. Culture has finally found the center space and as the linking space between different sectors. It is something which is not in a box, which connects all the boxes around us, whether it's economic, whether it is other areas, and because this is the way you live. And there is definitely an increase, as you said, between countries, in every country of G20, but also in the national education policy. Now there is more emphasis on imparting cultural education. It has to be part of every curriculum. It has to be part of at all levels of curriculum.
Absolutely. So we are looking at a greater integration or mainstreaming of culture in the global policy discourse, and this is encouraging. Culture has been recognized as a global public good as well. Thank you so much, Professor Said, for joining us with your views on India at G20. Well, that's it then in this edition of India at G20. We'll see you again tomorrow with a fresh edition of the show. Until then, thanks for watching.
The changing world of news. Headlines that you wake up to. News that shapes your day. Stories that matter to you. The latest and most accurate updates. A fresh start to a new day. The Breakfast News, Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. on DD India.
जल्दी टिफिन पैक करो। राजू, मोबाइल छोड़ो।
अरे दीदी वो बैंक का नंबर चाहिए, रिफंड ही नहीं आया है। मिल गया। अब भी कॉल करता हूँ दीदी।
बिना नंबर जांचे? अक्सर जालसाज बैंक की नकली वेबसाइट और फर्जी नंबर से पैसों की धोखाधड़ी करते हैं।
तो फिर सही नंबर?
बैंक की ऑफिशियल वेबसाइट या तो कार्ड पर।
आपने तो बचा लिया दीदी।
काम से नहीं।
RBI कहता है सही वित्तीय बर्ताव करे आपका बचाव।
You've got the award in the category of community welfare. Now tell us about your related activities in a little more detail.
My project is a team oriented. We are working together with the local communities and the students and different stakeholders. We organize the local communities at the grassroots level, and we are doing a certain infrastructure in the rural area, mostly in the rural areas. It includes construction of bridges, developing water stream. Now we are doing the check dams as well as electrification of villages. Also we have built one toilet in schools. So our project is a multi-dimensional project. We work in different areas.
It's 1 year since the Russia-Ukraine conflict. India has maintained a fiercely independent stand.
The present world order is based on the world as decided by the victors of the Second World War.
Yes.
And we are all saying that that is wrong.
India fully appreciates the security concerns of Russia and feels that US-led NATO and the Western world pushed Russia. And we also feel that Russia overreacted.
Today, India is not non-aligned. India is aligned to all those groups, all those forums, all those platforms that work on positive global agenda.
दीदी नौकरी लग गई।
अरे वाह, बधाई हो। तो अब तो ढेर सारी शॉपिंग।
हाँ दी, नया मोबाइल।
अरे रुको शहजादे, सैलरी से पहले खर्चे।
इंस्टेंट लोन भी तो मिलता है।
पहले बजट बनाना सीखो, फिर खर्च करो।
पर दी,
देखो, कमाई का एक हिस्सा हमेशा बचाना चाहिए, लेकिन पार्टी देने से नहीं बचोगे तुम।
हाँ दी, पार्टी मेरी, बजट तुम्हारा।
अच्छा।
RBI कहता है,
सही वित्तीय बर्ताव करे आपका बचाव।
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of India Ideas, the weekly show which is all about science and tech, innovation and entrepreneurship. I'm Gautam Roy. Phishing, ransomware, malware, etc. are all different types of cyber attacks. They all saw a spike during the pandemic due to the increased usage of the digital domain, and this has made cybersecurity a major concern, even for India's defense establishment. That's what we're talking about today. Well, the recently concluded Aero India 2023 show in Bengaluru saw a lot of impressive military hardware and software on display, some even flaunting their formidable capabilities. The 5-day event also saw Defence Minister Rajnath Singh launching the 9th edition of the Defence Industry Startup Challenge, or DISE #9, in the field of cybersecurity. The reason being, cybersecurity-related threats and challenges are no longer confined to the digital world with a new age of digitization and growth in cyber technologies, but have become a matter of national security. The Ministry of Defence wanted to promote R&D in this field, so it had different 9 armed and security establishments put forward 28 different problem statements for startups to address and solve. Let's talk about this effort today. We have with us on our panel, let's introduce our guest. Vivek Vermani is with us. He's a CAO, DIO, which is a not-for-profit company under Section 8 of the Companies Act 2013, formed for the purpose of funding and managing IDEX, or Innovation for Defence Excellence. We've also got Lakshmi Das, co-founder and product evangelist at Prophase, which is a made-in-India cybersecurity product company and a cloud-native security provider that helps secure enterprise applications and ensures data security. And we also have Dr. Pawan Dugal with us, cyber law and cybersecurity expert, well-known one at that. Welcome to you all, and start with you Vivek. Tell us how and why was cybersecurity zeroed in on as the broad problem statement for the 9th edition of DISE?
Thank you, Gautam. I would start with what IDEX is. So IDEX stands for Innovations for Defense Excellence.